I never meant to notice her. Not really. But the first time I saw her, it was like the world forgot to breathe for a second. I had just moved into this quiet, worn-down apartment building on the edge of the city, the kind of place you pick when you're starting over, licking your wounds in silence. My marriage had crumbled 6 months earlier. One day I was a husband with a mortgage and a golden retriever, and the next I was just a man with a U-Haul, some regrets, and a heart I didn't trust anymore. She lived in the unit across the hall, apartment to be. I only saw her by accident through the half-open blinds on her balcony, bathed in the gold of a late September sunset. She sat there curled up in an old chair with a book in one hand and a blanket wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Her hair was pulled up in a messy knot, and even from where I stood, she looked tired, beautiful. Yes, but in that quiet, haunted way that made something in me ache. I told myself not to get curious. Curiosity turns into conversations, and conversations turn into feelings. And I wasn't ready for that, not again. But over the next few weeks, she was just ... there. In the elevator, carrying groceries. In the hallway, locking her door with a distracted sigh. We'd exchange polite nods and the occasional half-smile, never quite meeting each other's eyes for too long. Still, there was something about her that stuck. The way she lingered in her own sadness, like it had become a part of her skin. I knew that feeling. Hell, I lived it. It was in the way she paused before answering small talk, like she had to find the words underwater. In the quiet evenings, I'd hear the soft hum of her music leaking through the wall. Old records, mostly jazz, the kind that sounds like slow heartbreak. Once or twice, I thought I heard her cry. Then came that night. The power cut out during a storm. The building groaned under the weight of wind and darkness. I was halfway through lighting a candle when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find her standing there in sweatpants and a hoodie too big for her frame, holding a flashlight and biting her bottom lip. "Mine came back," she said softly, lifting her flashlight. "If you want to wait it out, you can come over, or I can bring you something." Her voice was careful, like she was afraid she'd said too much already. I didn't even think. I just said yes. Her place smelled like cinnamon and rain, dimly lit by flickering candles. And her cat, a suspicious gray tabby named Basil, watched me from the edge of the sofa like I was a burglar. We sat across from each other with mugs of tea, talking like people who didn't know if they were allowed to. She told me she'd been engaged. Lost him suddenly last year. Heart failure. He was 33. I still talk to him sometimes, she said, her eyes staring past me. In the shower before bed. I know he's not there, but... She shrugged. Grief needs somewhere to go. I told her about the divorce, about how it wasn't anyone's fault, but it still felt like losing a part of my own body. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to be strong or clever or okay. We weren't flirting, we weren't trying, we were just two lonely people trading stories and silence like currency. When I left, hours later, she touched my wrist gently, almost by accident, and it lingered. That touch, that moment. I didn't know it then, but it would change everything. Because she wasn't just my neighbor after that. She was the first person in a long time who made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could want more again. Asterisk, I couldn't stop thinking about her. After that night, the storm, the candles, the quiet, we didn't go back to pretending. Something had shifted between us, something neither of us said out loud. But it was there every time our eyes met in the hallway. Before, we had been neighbors with space between us. Kay, now it felt like every glance held a question neither of us knew how to answer. I caught myself waiting for her, listening for her door, pausing by my window to see if her lights were on. And when they were, I'd feel something warm and stupid rise in my chest. I wasn't proud of it, but I was starving for connection, and somehow she had become the only thing that felt real. We started talking more, little things at first, books. Her job at a gallery downtown, how she hated the sound of microwaves and loved thunderstorms. One night, she knocked again. No reason. Just stood there in pajama shorts and said, "I made too much soup," holding out a steaming bowl with this soft, crooked smile. That night, we sat on my floor with our backs against the couch, eating soup and drinking cheap wine while her laughter filled all the hollow spaces inside me. I hadn't laughed like that in months. Maybe longer. Still, we didn't touch. Not yet. We danced around it, careful and slow, like we both knew the line we were tiptoeing across. She'd lean in close to show me something on her phone, and my breath would hitch when her shoulder brushed mine. Her hand would linger too long on my arm when she said goodbye. There was tension in everything, heavy, magnetic, but neither of us pushed. We were scared, I think. Scared to want something again, scared to lose it. Then, one Friday night, everything cracked open. I had a rough day at work, tense meetings, a client meltdown, the usual grind on when I got home. I found a note taped to my door. Just two. Words scrawled in quick handwriting. "Come over." No name. No explanation. Just that. I knocked and she opened the door in a soft black t-shirt and leggings. Barefoot, her eyes tired but warm. "Bad day?" she asked, like she already knew. I nodded. She stepped aside and let me in. We didn't talk much. She handed me a beer. Turned on some music, low, slow, something with strings, and we sat on the floor again, this time in her apartment, this time a little closer. The room smelled like vanilla and old books. Basil, her cat, curled up nearby, purring softly like background music to our silence. And then it happened. She reached for my hand, just like that. Words. No big moment. It's just her fingers finding mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. I looked at her and she looked at me, and whatever was left of our resistance fell away. She leaned in, hesitant at first, lips brushing mine like a question. I answered with a kiss that deepened fast, need curling into every corner of it. Months of tension breaking free all at once. We kissed like people who had been starving for touch, for connection, for someone. And when she pulled away, breathless, cheeks flushed, she whispered, "I've wanted to do that since the night of the storm." I didn't say anything. I just kissed her again, slower this time, trying to memorize the way her mouth moved against mine, the way she trembled just slightly, like she was just as scared of this as I was. We didn't sleep together that night, not yet. But we curled up on our couch, tangled in each other, falling asleep to the rhythm of shared warmth and unspoken promises. And I knew, as I drifted off with her hand still in mine, that we had already crossed a line. There was no going back now. I knew I was falling for her the morning I woke up with her head on my chest and her fingers curled into my shirt like she was holding on in her sleep. And I should have felt terrified hell a few months ago. I would have been, but all I felt was calm, like my body knew something before my mind could catch up. Her breath moved softly against my skin, her legs tangled with mine, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't wake up feeling empty. I didn't wake up missing someone. I didn't wake up hating myself. She mumbled something in her sleep, half dream, half memory, and I kissed the top of her head without thinking. That scared me. How natural it was. how much I wanted it again. But the thing about falling is, you don't get to choose the speed. You just hit the ground and hope they're there to catch you. That week, things started to shift. Not in a dramatic way, just in those tiny, invisible ways you notice when someone starts to matter. She left her scarf at my place, started picking up her favorite tea without thinking, spent more nights together than apart. She'd come over with takeout and curl up beside me like it was the most normal thing in the world, and it felt normal. Felt like something we'd been doing forever, like we were just picking up where we left off in a life we hadn't lived yet, but still, we didn't talk about what we were, no labels, no promises. It's just this ... in between. And maybe that was the problem. We were acting like lovers, but holding back like strangers. One night, I asked her to stay. Not just crash on the couch or spend the night, but stay. For real. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a second, I saw something shift behind them: fear, maybe, or guilt. She smiled, kissed me softly, and said, "I want to." But she didn't. Not that night. She left around midnight, said she couldn't sleep. Without her own pillow, it felt like a lie, but I didn't push. I told myself to be patient, to let her have her space. After all, she'd lost someone. I knew grief doesn't move in straight lines. But deep down, I started to feel at the pull of something I couldn't quite name. Doubt it got worse when she started pulling back. Little things. She took longer to reply to my texts, canceled plans with vague excuses. When I kissed her, sometimes she'd turn her head slightly, like she didn't mean to, like she wasn't fully here. And the hardest part was, I couldn't be angry, because I understood. I knew what it was like to carry ghosts into new rooms. But I also knew what it felt like to be someone's second choice. And that tease, a feeling you don't forget. One night, I found her on the rooftop of our building, staring out over the city. The wind pulled at her hair, and she didn't even look back when I walked up beside her. "I'm sorry," she said before I said a word. I didn't mean to disappear. I swallowed hard. "But you did." She looked at me then, really looked, eyes shining under the dim city glow. "I don't know how to be with someone without feeling like I'm betraying him." Her voice cracked. "But I'm tired of missing people who don't come back." Stepped closer, then choose someone who's still here. She didn't say anything, just leaned her forehead against my chest and breathed me in like she was trying to remember how. I wrapped my arms around her and held her as the city hummed below us, not knowing if this was a beginning or the start of the end. But in that moment, she was mine. And for now, that was enough. Asterisk, I should have known something was wrong the second she stopped knocking. That was always her thing, showing up with no warning, barefoot on my welcome mat, holding Thai food or a sad plant she'd found on clearance. But for 3 days, nothing. No texts, no sounds from her apartment. Just this heavy quiet between our doors, like the air itself was holding its breath. I told myself not to spiral. She had bad days, grief days. Maybe she just needed space. But the truth was, I felt it. In my gut, that cold, creeping sense that something had changed. I hated how fast my mind went to the worst. That maybe I'd pushed too hard. That maybe she'd finally realized I was too much. Or worse, that I'd never really been enough. On the 4th day, I knocked on her door. 3 soft taps, like always, no answer. I waited a few minutes, knocked again, and still nothing. Her lights were off. The cat didn't meow. Our mail was starting to pile up in the hallway. That was when my heart started to beat a little faster, thudding against my ribs like it knew something I didn't. I texted her, "You okay? Haven't seen you?" And I sat by my window with that sick feeling in my stomach, staring at her door like it might open if I just wished hard enough. It didn't, but the next morning her voice finally echoed in the hallway, except it wasn't. For me, she was laughing. And it wasn't the soft, careful laugh she saved for late-night talks or silly movies on my couch. It was bright, easy. The kind of laugh you give someone you're not afraid to impress. I peeked out just in time to see her standing by her door with a man. Tall, clean-cut, polished in a way I'd never be. He was holding a suitcase and her keys. My stomach dropped. She looked different. Not like she was in pain, not like she was dragging around the weight of loss. She looked alive, like a part of her had come back to life. And I hadn't even been invited to see it. I don't know how long I stood there, gripping the edge of my doorframe like it might hold me up. Long enough to realize she'd been pulling away for a reason. Long enough to understand that I'd been the in-between, the comfort, the warm body in the lonely nights until something more familiar came back. I told myself maybe it was her brother or a cousin, but I knew better. You don't smile like that at blood. You don't lean in like that unless you're remembering how someone used to taste. That night, she didn't knock, she didn't text, and I didn't sleep. Just lay there staring at the ceiling, my chest full of static, remembering every moment she'd pulled away, every kiss she cut short, every night she left early. All of it had a new shape now, a new weight. I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't, because love doesn't turn off like a switch, it leaks out, slow and stupid, even after you know it's not safe anymore. The next morning, her door was closed, her lights off again. This time, I didn't wonder. I knew she had made a choice, and it wasn't me. Heartbreak doesn't always explode, it erodes quietly, slowly like waves against a rock, till one day you wake up and realize there's less of you left. That's how it felt after I saw her with him. Not rage, not even shock. Just this hollow ache that spread through my chest and settled behind my ribs, heavy and familiar. I went through the motions: work, laundry, talking to people who didn't know I was bleeding, but everything felt muffled, like life was happening on the other side of a thick glass wall. I kept telling myself it was stupid to feel this broken. She wasn't mine. Not officially, not really. Try telling that to the part of me that had memorized the way she laughed in her sleep, or how she always hummed a little when she cooked. Try telling that to the space beside me in bed that still smelled faintly like her shampoo. I avoided the hallway. I stopped opening my blinds. I even took the back stairs just to keep from running into her, because I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at her and pretend like I didn't care, like she hadn't carved out a place inside me without even trying. But it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. The worst part wasn't that she'd chosen someone else. It was that she'd done it quietly. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. Like I was a chapter she'd decided to skip over. A placeholder. A warm body in a long winter. Then one night, nearly a week later, there was a knock at my door. I froze. My heart started beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I opened it, and there she was. No makeup, no pretense, just sweatpants and a hoodie, hair tied up in a messy knot, her eyes rimmed red like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking up at me like she wasn't sure if I'd slam the door or pull her in. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice so small I almost didn't hear it. I stepped aside and she walked in like it hurt, like every step was an apology. "I messed up," she said, sitting on the edge of my couch, hands trembling. "That guy, Ethan, he came back. I didn't expect it. We were engaged. And when he left after the funeral, I thought it was over. I didn't think he'd ever want to come back, but he did. She looked at me then, her eyes wet and pleading. I panicked. I thought maybe if I gave him another chance, I could feel like I used to, like before he died, before everything fell apart. I sat across from her, silent. Not because I didn't have words, because I had too many. Rage, hurt, relief, confusion, and I finally said, my voice didn't sound like mine. Did it work? Do you feel like you used to? She shook her head slowly. No, I feel like a liar. Because even when he held me, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Her lip quivered. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I needed you to know. You weren't a placeholder. You were the only thing in my life that felt real. She started crying, then soft, broken sobs into her hands. I just sat there, frozen. I should have been angry. I was angry. But all I could see was the woman I'd fallen asleep beside. The woman who cried over tea and let me kiss the cracks in her. And as much as I hated it, I still wanted her. Even now. Maybe especially now. Asterisk, asterisk. It's strange how forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It arrives in pieces, small, uneven shards, that scrape their way through you until, somehow, they start to fit together. That night, as she sat on my couch crying, her shoulders shaking like the guilt had finally cracked her open, I didn't rush to comfort her. I just watched her. Watched the woman who had kissed me like I was her anchor and walked away like I was air. My heart was torn in two directions. One half wanted to hold her, to wrap myself around the sorrow in her voice and never let her feel alone again. The other half, it wanted to protect what was left of me. 'Cause loving someone doesn't always mean you let them back in. Sometimes it means learning how to love yourself more. She looked up at me through those tear-soaked lashes. The silence between us swollen with everything we hadn't said. I still love him, she whispered. But I think I was holding on to a memory, not a person. You were the first thing that made me feel alive again. She paused, searching my face. And that scared the hell out of me. I nodded slowly, a lump in my throat. Yeah, I said, barely able to speak. It scared me too. I reached for her hand, not because I knew what I wanted, but because I needed to feel that warmth again. Something to remind me this wasn't all a dream I'd built alone. Our fingers tangled, hesitant, unsure. We sat like that for a long time, just holding hands and listening to the rain that had started to fall outside. Soft, steady, like it was washing away what we used to be. That night she stayed. Not out of desperation or guilt or nostalgia, but because I asked her to. We lay in bed without touching for a long time, backs turned, our breathing trying to sink again. And eventually, in the dark, she reached behind her and found my hand under the covers. I don't know how to be whole yet, she said, voice raw. But I want to try with you. I turned toward her, pulled her close, and kissed her like she was something fragile but still mine. Not with heat, not with urgency, but with the kind of softness that says, I see you. I'm still here. And when we finally made love again, it wasn't about release or lust, it was about choosing each other in spite of the cracks. Every touch was slower, deeper. We held each other like people who'd already lost and somehow still dared to believe in another beginning. The next morning, she made coffee in my kitchen like she belonged there. She fed Basil, kissed the top of his head, and smiled when she caught me watching her. There was still grief in her eyes, still uncertainty. But there was something else, too, something steadier. Hope. We didn't define it. We didn't need to. We were learning slowly how to be honest, how to show up. She still had things to figure out. So did I, but we weren't hiding anymore. And maybe that's what love is. In the end, not some perfect, flawless story where no one gets hurt, but to people who choose to stay, even after the storm, even after the silence, oh, even after the truth. She was just my lonely neighbor once, a ghost behind a door. But that night, the night she came back, we shared more than words. We shared the truth. And somehow, against every odd, it was enough. Maybe it always had been.